morning from Texas. Here it is more or less 10 o'clock, no, 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm Irache Calzacorta, a board member of Agile Spain. And right now, I am with Diana Larsen. She's a famous co-author of Agile retrospectives, making good teams great.
This one has a new subtitle.
Yeah, because this is the second edition.
It's the second edition.
And there's a third co-author,
Yeah.
David Horowitz.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how are you, Diana?
I'm good. My voice, we had the big conference party last night, so lots of noise, lots of fun. I don't drink, so I didn't. That's not, but it does. Sometimes my voice gets a little scratchy after that kind of an evening, singing and dancing. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's start with the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Here is the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about your journey into Agile and what drew you to this field?
Well, it was a lot of threads. A lot of threads came together that brought me here. But my dad was a systems analyst. He was one of the first kind of computer programmer managers, right after World War II, going into for the company that he worked with. And so I was always around that kind of thinking and those tools. He'd bring home flowchart things and stuff. And so that's part of it. And I think my brain works a lot like his brain worked. And then when I went to college, when I went to college, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. And so I started out by taking computer science classes. And then I got counseled into another program. I was doing very well in the computer science classes, but different things came up. And so someone asked me, well, what else are you studying that you like? And I had taken a class called Human Relations in Business.
Oh.
And I said, I really enjoyed that class. And so those two things, liking the computer field, feeling comfortable with people, software people, hardware people, and then also overlaying that, what's the human part of this work, led me over time. Eventually I became a organization design professional, and I worked primarily on work process design. So for a lot in high-tech manufacturing, in government program administration, in different engineering fields, various technical areas. And that led to me being invited to a conference, a small conference in 1997. I was invited to a small conference, and because there weren't a lot of women who'd accepted the invitation to be there. So the organizer was looking for more women, and he found me and invited me. And there I met several Agile Manifesto signers: Ward Cunningham, Ron Jeffries, Martin Fowler, and other people who were new into the extreme programming way of thinking. Joshua Karievsky, some other folks, and so that was my introduction to the extreme programming folks.
Wow.
And after that, and that conference then continued year after year, and I went back year after year because it was exciting, and I liked really being with those people. And I was still working
the big ones.
Yeah, and I was still working in the high-tech manufacturing, doing a lot of lean, so the ideas of the Agile Manifesto were familiar to me.
Yeah.
They weren't strange. But I also had the organizational development and design background. And so when I would come and I would talk about team development, or how when you formed a team, how it interacted with the organization, or what kind of leadership it needed, I was welcomed. And I went to a few more conferences, and Kent Beck asked me to write some things for a journal that he was editing. And Joshua and I ended up partnering at some early conferences to talk about organizational change and things like that. And then I got invited to be on the Agile Alliance board, and I mean, it just kind of kept rolling. But what I discovered from that experience was that my role was to bring the practices and knowledge and the wisdom I had gained from that agile organizational development, organizational design world to offer the agile world. And so that's where retrospectives came from. That's where, and partly where they came from. Also, the organizer of that early conference was Norm Kurth, who had written the Project Retrospectives book. So I saw how that applied to software. And so I just started saying, well, here's continuous improvement from Lean. It's really important. Continuous. So we'll do retrospectives, and then we'll make sure that the teams get a great start. So we wrote Liftoff with my other co-author, Ainsley Neese, and I just kind of kept contributing and eventually consulting and coaching and so on. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, second one, who or what has been the biggest influence on your professional development? You also answered this.
Yeah, well, actually meeting those people, I was fairly intimidated by very big brains that were in the room in that conference. But I soon learned that I had something to offer. And I'm also a book reader. And so I have a huge professional library. And Ed Schein is an author more in the organization development, but his ideas around culture, corporate culture, and he wrote a series of books called Humble Leadership, Humble Consulting. Those really have affected me. Meeting Linda Rising, meeting Rebecca Werfsbrock, meeting Jutta Eckstein, some of the women who were early into the Agile community, we bonded, and they influenced me on how I could contribute. And so, again, lots of streams coming together.
Okay. Next one. What skills are essential in an Agile leader, and how can they cultivate them?
Well, I wrote a book with Tricia Broderick called Lead Without Blame, Building Resilient Learning Teams. And it is about how do you best lead teams and create a work environment where teams can be successful and make their contribution to their organization, right? Which, through delivery and so on. And in that book, we talk about 4 sort of behaviors, 4 behavioral qualities that we believe is important for a leader to exemplify the kind of learning that we need to do. So we're really moving even further beyond knowledge work into learning work. We can't always rely on what we thought before. Now we have to discover new paths, new programming languages. I mean, new technologies, new ideas, new combinations of how things fit together. And so those 4 behaviors are courage. We believe a leader needs to be able to have courage. And that courage has to do with not only advocating for the teams and advocating for what teams need to do their learning, but also being a role model, being what we call a learning leader, and being willing to say when somebody comes with asking for an answer, saying, I don't know either, and being willing to do that. And then taking it further and saying, I don't know either. Let's go figure it out together.
Yep.
And modeling that behavior.
Leading by example.
Yeah. And the expectation is that leaders are supposed to know it all. So it takes some courage to be willing to say, I don't know, right? So the second behavior is compassion. And it has to do with the fact that we are building environments where people need to learn, and learning can be difficult. And we all understand that there's often a learning curve, which means we have to be patient while people are learning until they have the skills and can really accelerate into using them. But there is that period of time where things are going to slow down because of the learning. And so being compassionate about that and being patient is really important. The third one is confidence. Having set that environment where you're supporting the team, you're advocating for the team, knowing that team members are going to be able to do what they need to do to get the job done, then you can have confidence in them. And I don't mean showing fake confidence by being a cheerleader. I mean really being able to say, I know you've got this. You know, I can hand this off to you. Thank you for taking accountability for it. Let me know what you need, but I know you're going to be able to learn your way through this. And that's the resilience part, right? Teams that can really learn their way through whatever challenge comes to them. And then the fourth one is so important, and it's another C. The fourth one is so important, and it's complexity. Getting a better sense of complex adaptive systems, of systems thinking, of what does it mean to live in a world that where we have to build our awareness of so much complexity. The thing about complex adaptive systems is you need to learn to be able to see that there's a system.
Yeah.
And then what can you understand about that system? And then how can you influence that system? And so that I've learned from Glenda O. Yang and Dave Snowden and all the complexity thinkers that are out there. And so those four, if a person in a leadership role can kind of self-assess, and on comparative agility now, we have an assessment for those 4 C's to say, where am I strong? Where am I, where could I use a little boost? Where could I get more? That kind of thing. And it's that self-awareness of, am I bringing to my teams what they need from me? And it's more than being a servant leader. It's that sort of host leader. I love that idea that the leader is providing the party space and the party, and then making sure that everybody can enjoy themselves while they're there, do good things. And so, yeah. And I think that's what's really important now. And the being able to see that not only are maybe the teams that I have responsibility to make sure they have what they need, but also working with my peer leaders.
Yeah.
And bringing some of those same, having compassion for their roles and how they can get squished in the middle, and courage to say, we need to work together on this.
Because they are part of a bigger system.
Because they're part of a bigger system. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you see the agile landscape evolving over the next few years?
Wow, that is a really good question. I don't know. Let's go find it out together, right? I feel like there's been a lot of talk about Agile is dead and it needs to evolve and so on, and I don't think it's that. I think Agile won. I mean, there are very few organizations now that would say, no, we really want to be phased development. We really want to be waterfall. We want to take all that time and waste all that time, right? So most everybody is embracing some Agile to some degree and wanting to call it, saying they have an Agile.
Doing Agile.
They want to say we're doing Agile, yeah. Whether they've shifted their mindsets or not. But out of that, because it's one, that we are looking toward what is the next thing that's going to emerge. One of the things that I'm really looking at is, with my session here, about FAST, fluid adaptive scaling technology, and the idea that it's kind of a recombinant thing. It's taking all these different ideas from different Agile approaches, Agile books, the dynamic reteaming, and team self-selection, and a lot of the things that we've borrowed, like team of teams and open space, and there's just a lot of them. And it has taken all these new ways of doing things
Yeah.
and put them together into one way of managing that, one way of using that to do work. And so I think that's really interesting. I'm really interested in what the folks who were talking about reimagining Agile.
Yeah, that was
What is it there? What is it that they are doing? How, what are they trying? John Kern, who's part of that group, is going around and uh, researching for stories of where Agile is being really done well, and what parts of Agile those folks are using and what's most important to them, and how they know that they are doing it well, what kind of outcomes are they getting. He's pulling a lot of those stories. He did that at I went to his session on that at the XP conference in Bolzano a couple of months ago. And so I think that's really, I'm really interested in what's going to come out of that. And there are other streams like that. People are out there exploring what is our edge, where is our edge, and how are we going to go beyond the edge of what we know or think we know in Agile now. So which one is going to be the next total quality management or business process reengineering? I don't know.
Let's discover together.
But we're going to discover it together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What advice would you give to organizations that just begin in agile mindset or in an agile journey?
The advice I would give is don't think you're going to be able to find one methodology and then just follow that methodology strictly and get the results you want. You have to be more open-minded than that. You have to look at what is the nature of the work in your organization. What is it that you need? James Shore and I created a model called the Agile Fluency Model, where we encouraged organizations to say, what is it you really want from your teams? What kind of outcomes? What do your customers need from you, or then the customers of the teams, if it's an internal operational thing? What do we really need from Agile? What do we need it to do, at least to begin with? What are our ideas about that? And think more in a more nuanced way. And then, if you feel like you can go it alone and just start putting something together, read about FAST, read about some of these other things that are coming on, and say, do we have the skills to just implement this ourselves? Do we have a deep enough understanding to implement this ourselves? And if you do, great. I mean, that happened with the Agile Fluency Model. Some people just read it, started applying it in their organization, worked great. Spotify did that, and a lot of others. But other folks say, I'm not sure we do have the skills to do this. And so then make sure that if you reach out to some consultants or something, that they're not just bringing their idea of what you should do that they developed somewhere else and making it happen in your organization, because that may not be right for your organization at all. You want to find helpers, advisors who are broad-minded enough to say, well, looks like you might need to start here. You might need a little of this. You might want to, if these two teams have a dependency, you might want to merge them together and think about that in a different way, so that you're not always having wait times and handoffs and waiting for decisions to be made or that kind of thing. That's all waste. So if you can put those teams together, you can eliminate some of that waste. So, there are those kinds of things. It's like there's but I do think it's very important. I've gone into many organizations where I have asked at the team level, what are you working on? Oh, well, we have this list of tasks. Well, what's the thing you're building? We don't know, right? Or what is the value? And then I go to their product owner. What's the overall business value you're trying to capture? I don't know. We're just building this thing, right? And I have gone all the way up to vice presidents in some instances in an organization to say, what is value here? What kind of value are you trying to create? And they can't answer me.
Wow.
Yeah. So that kind of internal, like figuring some of those things out will help you know what kind of work you're doing, what is the value you're trying to create, will help you know what kind of teams you need and what kind of agile you need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And another advice for those people who start playing roles like Scrum Masters or Agile coaches in these organizations?
Yes. There's a group of us in my local user group called Agile PDX for Portland, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And we got together and did some deep thinking about what are the qualities that you look for in an Agile coach to know that you're really going to get what you need. And some of them have to do with their own ability to continue to work on their own development, both personally and professionally. Some of it has to do with helping people communicate and how does the team communicate with each other, and as that gets richer and richer, how do they communicate outside the organization or outside the team boundaries. But eventually we get to a place, and each of these, we divided it into sort of columns, and we have like 15 different qualities in each column. But eventually we got to technical excellence. Yeah, anyway. We got to awareness of other disciplines. And so that's what I would encourage Scrum Masters and Agile coaches to do, is not only are you building those kind of skills that we are kind of obvious, how does a team run their meetings, how to, those kinds of things, but also look outside, look at beyond budgeting, look at lean, look at, there's a lot of sociocracy, or all organization development, organization design. Look at all of those other streams. Find the ones that interest you. You can't cover the whole landscape, but you can find the few that interest you and add that to your Agile toolbox.
Yeah, and
because
use them.
It gives you a richer set of resources to draw on, and build your network so that you can be self-aware. I'm not a technical person. I understand technical work pretty well because I've been paying attention to that for 25 years now or so. But I also know that if it comes to coding, my understanding of work process is not going to be a help at fixing a coding problem. And there's Emily Beige here at the conference, actually coming in, the keynote that came in from Manchester. She was saying you can't use process to fix a coding problem. So I know that I need to have a network that includes a lot of really excellent technical coaches, or just technical
to get help
workers
from them, no?
To be able to pull them in when the time is right, when I know the team needs more hands-on work at, like for instance, I know the importance of TDD. I understand it. I would never encourage, I use it in a writing kind of way, but I would never say I can teach people TDD, because I can't do the code, and I don't understand enough different coding languages and things. So I need to have somebody in my network, that at least maybe many somebodies in my network that I can pull in and bring to the team and say, here's somebody who's going to be super helpful to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. The last one.
Yeah.
You know that my colleague Maria and I wrote this book about retrospectives because of you and Estelle.
Thank you.
What advice would you give us to become experts as you in retrospectives? We love them, and we really believe that there are the best and worst and difficult part of team work.
Right.
What advice?
Well, our first book, the first retrospective book that we wrote, we were looking at people who were helping a team, and working in iterations, sprints, iterations, time boxes, right? And we talked a little bit about moving the retrospectives elsewhere in the organization, but not a lot. There's a lot more about that in here.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing I think is important for us to understand is now that, I mean, and in here we talk about if you've got a 2-week sprint, you're probably going to allow an hour and a half if you want to get really rich outcomes and things like that. That's a little different now in the remote world. You might need to do that. You might need to do some work before you get into the actual meeting and some things like that. So, and now people are also having the opportunity to work in much smaller chunks. So, consider, I not only consider the idea of you might want to do a retrospective for a release and all the people who are involved in one release. You might want to invite leadership groups to do retrospectives on how are they doing in providing the environments that they need, that the teams need. But then beyond that, then on the other end, I've been talking a lot about what I call micro retros.
Micro
retros still has the 5: set the stage, gather data, generate insights, decide what to do, close the retrospective, but very fast.
Wow.
So for instance, some mobs I know, the teams that are doing software teaming, which is also called mob programming, work in Pomodoros. They work in 25 minutes, then they take a little break, and then they come back and they work in another 25 minutes. Some of those folks are after 25 minutes, okay, it's time for our retrospective. What did we notice in this last 25 minutes about our work? What stands out for us about it? What of that do we want to change or improve or make sure we keep? Maybe we stumbled across something that was really helpful. We want to make sure that we remember to do that again. Which of those do we want to incorporate right away? And okay, now let's all go on our break.
In 25 minutes.
5
minutes. 5 things.
Between the Pomodoros.
Whoa.
And you write down that one thing that you're going to apply in. They're usually very small things. They might be like one example I know of is somebody had a condition on the team in their arms, and so they didn't use the QWERTY keyboard. They used one of those other kind of keyboards. Yeah, they're more ergonomic, and the numbers and letters are in different order and stuff. And he said, when I'm working like this, but then over there I have to go, when I'm in the driver on the team, I have to go over there. Is there some way that we could accommodate? So they just set up the driver's seat so that it had both keyboards. Easy fix, right? They could do it just immediately. And from then on, when he was driver, he could use one. The others could experiment with using that one if they wanted to, right? Or they could just use the QWERTY keyboard. But it improved their work environment. It improved his ability to do what he needed to do as the driver. Small thing. We're in this room and it's kind of airless in here. Could we have a plant? So later today we'll go out and buy a plant, right? I mean, the small. It's a lot of times the things that keep us from doing our best work are actually very small things, and when the team gets used to fixing those small things, they're building muscle so that they can take on some of the bigger things. And maybe then at the end of 2 weeks or at the end of a month or something, you have a larger retrospective looking back over all those things that you addressed in the small ones and being saying, do we see any patterns in this? Is there something bigger we want to look at? But so you can use them together. So using more large retrospectives, longer, more people, tackling more complex problems, and more small retrospectives. So you've got that kind of continuous improvement going on. Yeah,
it's more easy to change the mindset. Doing the small things.
Right. Yeah, it's an easy thing, right?
Wow.
But
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to finish the interview. Do you want to say anything to the Spanish Agile community?
I absolutely do. I hope I get the chance to come and visit you in person someday. I like to travel. I like to travel in Europe, so I'm hoping that will become possible sometime. And I'm just happy to be here with you electronically this time. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure for me, especially.
Yeah.
And let's enjoy the rest of the Agile 2024.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.